Hey everybody, Father Warner here. We are in the Friday of the 7th week in Easter, and since yesterday we have literally jumped two chapters in the lectionary. So if you look at yesterday's reading, we were in chapter 21. Today we are in chapter 23. And the text of today tells us of a meeting that takes place between King Agrippa, who is the de facto ruler of the Jews. He and his wife Bernice have traveled all the way up to Caesarea, which is at the north, to meet with the newly appointed governor Festus, and it talks about the interaction between them. But before I get to this interaction, I need to take you through what's happened so far. So we know that Paul addresses the chief priests and the elders, and as I said yesterday, he set the cat among the pigeons by saying, I'm a Pharisee, and as a consequence, there was a division between the council because some were Pharisees and some were Sadducees, and they could not really pass judgment against Paul. Now, there were some Jews who were so angered as a consequence of all of this that they decided that Paul had to be assassinated. And we are told that about 40 of them swear not to eat or drink till they had Paul assassinated. Now, they go to the chief priests and they go to the elders. The chief priest, and at this point of time, was Annas, and they go to the chief priests and to the elders to tell them of their plot. So here you have the chief priests and the elders all conspiring to murder. Thou shalt not kill has gone out of the window. You see, even religious people very often dabble in sin just because they would rather have their point of view, their way, their beliefs. So we've got to be careful. We've got to be very, very careful. So they come to the chief priests and the elders and they say, look, why don't you have the tribune whose name was Lysias, why don't you have him bring Paul here and we will assassinate Paul while he is being brought. Now, very interestingly, chapter 21 tells us that Paul had a sister, and I thought that was such a beautiful little introduction to a relative, a close relative to Paul whom we have never heard of. But we are told that Paul's nephew, through his sister's son, gets wind of what is about to happen, and he goes to Paul. Paul tells him to go to the tribune and narrate what has happened, and as a consequence, the tribune, Lysias, decides to send Paul from Jerusalem to Caesarea. Caesarea was in the north. It was where the governor resided. It was a port city, beautiful. Much of it today is underwater, literally. But you still see the ruins of this very beautiful city, which was the residence of the governor. And in order to protect Paul, the tribune says more than 470 soldiers, 70 of them on horseback, 200 with spears. I mean, this was, he realized, there was this plot to kill him was serious, and he had to protect this Roman citizen. Paul was a Roman citizen, and that is how the governor decided to protect this Roman citizen. So he is sent to the governor Felix, and you can read the interaction between Felix, or Felix as some would say. It just simply means happy. So Felix, who was in Caesarea, keeps him under guard in the very headquarters of Herod. Remember, there were also palaces of the Jewish kings in various parts of Israel, and Herod also had a palace built there. Now, we're told that 5 days later, the chief priest himself, Annas, turns up, and he comes with an advocate, a lawyer by the name of Tertullius. This chap, kind of lathers and then shaves. Yeah, he likes to be to butter up the governor, and then of course he pulls out his knife towards, not physically but metaphorically, wants to pull out his knife and kill Paul, he calls, I found these words very interesting. He calls Paul a pestilent fellow. In short, he says Paul is a pest. Yeah. And he says he's a pest because he's an agitator of Jews across the world. And then he says he's the ringleader of a sect called the Nazarites. Now, of course, Paul is given by the governor, Felix, he's given a chance to respond, and Paul, as usual, uses every opportunity to evangelize. We're told that Felix simply says, well, let the tribune come, and then for some odd reason, for the next 2 years, Paul is under house arrest. Remember, many of those letters that we speak of, the letters of Paul written from prison, really was not really a prison as we would understand. There would be a guard. In some case, he was shackled by a chain, but he had certain freedom, and he was generally under house arrest. And 2 years later, Felix, who was the governor, is moved out. He does not release Paul as a kind of, he didn't want to offend the Jews. But a new governor by the name of Festus arrives. And Festus, within 3 days, travels to Jerusalem. Once again, the Jews, the chief priests, all mob him. They demand that, a trial be held in Jerusalem. Of course, their intention was very clear. They wanted to assassinate Paul. But of course, Festus goes back to Caesarea. The Jews follow him, and Festus asks Paul, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to Jerusalem and have a trial? And Paul says, look, I'm a Roman citizen. I have a right to appeal to the emperor. And that is how Paul is going to be sent to Rome. I have been to the prison where Paul was kept in Rome. If you go to my blog, pottypadre.com, on this very teaching, you will see images of myself at that prison, and it's a very, very moving experience. So Paul is now going to be sent to Rome. The text of today, as I said, is a meeting between King Agrippa and his wife Bernice, who make a courtesy call to see the new governor in Caesarea. And while they are there, Festus brings up this issue. He says, I have examined this man, but really this is not a civil issue, it's a religious issue. But the Jews want to have, to make this into a civil issue. It's not, it's a religious issue. And I have spoken to Paul, and Festus says, now that he has appealed to Rome, I have decided to send him to Rome. And we know that Paul will go to Rome, where he will die. Remember, this was even prophesied. We did this yesterday in the text. There was a prophecy that Paul would die. What really amazes me when I think of Paul, and really if you look at the New Testament, I think 1/3 of the works in the New Testament are written by Paul or speak of Paul. Here was a man who was on fire. No other apostle has this kind of has really been covered by the New Testament as much as Paul. But he was a man on fire, and he could not even bear to waste time. He wanted Christ to be known. He wanted to get out of jail. We know that by tradition, Paul wanted to go to Spain and evangelize in Spain. And so if it meant that he had to go on trial and even lose his life, he was willing to do that. Our faith today, my dear brothers and sisters, does not reflect that of the martyrs. We are slowly becoming lukewarm. And therefore we need to develop our faith, because trials will come to all of us. And the question we need to ask ourselves is not so much, are we willing to die for Christ, but are we willing to live for Christ? This is far more difficult, to live a life in this world and as an example to everybody else. It's sometimes easier to die for Christ. It's more difficult to live each day for our Lord. I want to thank you for joining me. Many of you have been asking me how am I been doing. As you can see, I'm still slurring a bit. I think I had another minor Bell's palsy. The doctor said I had a clot in my left ear, so I still continue to experience pain. I'm on antibiotics. I'm on a painkiller. I take just one a day. I try to avoid too much. But the left ear continues to be a bit of a struggle. I think it's quite obvious when I speak to you. You can make out that I am struggling with the formation of words, and also I tend to slur a bit. It's not that I cannot pronounce. I know the word very often, but I'm struggling to even to kind of say that word. So thank you for your prayers. Do not worry too much about me. I am fine. God bless you. Don't forget to like this video. I've also realized that many of you do share these videos. So I want to thank those of you who do it very faithfully. Thank you for sharing these videos. And I'm also on Instagram. I do a smaller version of these teachings for younger people. Bye for now, everybody. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do that.